Luke Skywalker is oftentimes regarded as one of the most powerful Jedi Masters of not only his era, but in the history of the Jedi practice. Though since Legends continuity takes a deeper dive into Luke's background and story than the canonical iteration of the iconic character, many of his most impressive feats have been hidden away in the wide variety of Legends comics and novels that the movies do not largely follow or even reference. One of his most impressive feats may very well be the ability to master the forbidden form of lightsaber combat without falling victim to many pitfalls that students before him have been subject to. But what is this forbidden lightsaber form, and how was Luke Skywalker able to master it where others could not? Stick with us today, weary travelers of the galaxy, and let's look into what made Luke Skywalker successful in mastering the forbidden form 7, as well as why he elected to do so in the first place. First, it's important to remember how Jedi philosophies changed and evolved over the years, especially as it pertains to how Luke's view of the old Jedi Order and of the Clone Wars era was shifted in the formation of his new collective of Jedi Knights, and the new order that he would seek to establish following Return of the Jedi. The Jedi of the Clone Wars had a purely dogmatic view of a strict binary moral code. There was either light or dark, there was inherent good or pure evil, with no space in between to allow the luxury of basic human necessities such as attachment. They were to sacrifice possession and aspects of their individuality in order to conform to a system that saw no room for error or even flexibility. The Jedi librarian Jocasta Nu perfectly sums up this ideal in Attack of the Clones when Obi-Wan Kenobi is searching for the lost planet of Kamino. Jocasta Nu simply states that if it is not in the records, then it does not exist. And this one simple phrase seems to perfectly encapsulate the flawed idea of strict, unwavering mentality that the Jedi of this era possessed. It is when masters such as Qui-Gon Jinn challenge this philosophy that the individual becomes more in tune with the Force and with the universe as it surrounds them, which was a philosophy that not only did Luke come to realize during the course of his training, but that his masters also came to learn after the rise of the Empire and collapse of the Order as they themselves knew it. Master Yoda in Empire Strikes Back seems far wiser and worldlier than the strict war general that we see during the Clone War, and it was in part due to his failure and the self-imposed exile following his defeat at the hands of Darth Sidious that he finally came to realize just how in the dark the Jedi Order had been. And this is Yoda's first step in learning how Jedi are meant to serve the will of the Force rather than a political agenda, as he had let his previous order slip into unknowingly, what ultimately resulted in its destruction and the rise of the Sith. This is why Luke was not trained earlier, as Yoda and Obi-Wan had to know that it was the will of the Force for Luke to become a Jedi, and that Luke himself was committed to the path instead of their previous system, in which they would indoctrinate children from a very young age, and condition them into adulthood to abide by the Order's dogmatic principles. This balance and understanding of the Force is what served as a significant advantage for Luke when it came to learning about Form 7 without falling to the dark side. Form 7 lightsaber combat, also known as Juya, revolved around tapping into the dark side of the Force and using it to drive the aggression behind the form without falling victim to the allure of darkness if you were a Jedi. Sith, on the other hand, embraced this aggression, fueling their dark side tendencies. But the circumstances under which learned the form versus where other students have tried and failed is fundamentally different, and is key as to how Luke Skywalker was able to use it without he himself turning to the darkness. If a Jedi sought to learn Form 7 during the Clone Wars era, they would have to learn how to tap into an emotional state that had been suppressed since childhood. And due to this fundamental handicap, they would have been unable to do so effectively. These Jedi students had no fundamental knowledge for how to manage their emotional states in healthy manners, which led to them being mentally and emotionally stifled. This break in their emotional connection allowed them to finally feel anger and ferocity of the dark side, which often hooked them and drew them in. Luke, however, had a whole childhood and teenage era of emotional development that is more in line with what is fundamental and natural progression of childhood development. He grew up in a family environment with social circles and was allowed to develop his own connections, attachments, and explore his emotions in full rather than having them suppressed from early childhood. This is what made his father Anakin so dangerous to teach, as he had already developed attachments to his mother and his homeworld, or at least the only world that he knew in Tatooine. And it was this late stifling of his emotions that ultimately led him down to the path that would bring him to the dark side. After the fall of the Republic, Jedi masters such as Obi-Wan Obi-Wan and Yoda realized the hard way that Anakin was not in the wrong for feeling basic human emotions, but they were in the wrong for not handling it properly and telling him to simply let go of his attachments and calling it the Jedi way. This is why they adjusted their training regimen for Luke, allowing him to fully emotionally develop, and then learn how to use his emotions progressively in service of the Force and the greater galaxy as a whole, not stifling them like his father. With this proper emotional maturity and development, Luke was able to develop a far more personal connection with the Force, acknowledging the light and the dark and not the stark binaries, but that they were two sides of the same coin, and were destined to coexist with one another for eternity. This allowed him to approach the forbidden form objectively and with a level of understanding that very few before him had ever had, as there had only been two known masters of Form 7 during the Clone Wars era who had succeeded in staying in the light. The tragic aspect of this being that only Mace Windu was able to completely remain in the light side of the Force for the entirety of his stay as a Jedi, with even those that helped develop Form 7 and staying in the light for a period of time eventually falling to the dark side, such as Depa Billaba and Sora Bulk, able to learn about its intricacies without having the inherent bias of the old Jedi Order. Luke was able to properly learn how to use the form as a tool, and not fear it as a weapon of corruption and darkness as the previous order had. This is why Luke encouraged his Jedi to form meaningful relationships and even get married, teaching them that their connection with the Force will always surpass and supersede political agendas or dogmatic principles, as they are keepers of the peace where the Jedi before them were more akin to soldiers. He also understood that in his duty to protect the innocent and lead a new generation of enlightened Jedi Masters into the galaxy, he had to understand the Force in all of its aspects, the light and dark in tandem, as they were always meant to exist. When Luke began learning Form 7, he not only had the advantage of emotional flexibility and maturity, but a sense of duty and understanding. In understanding Form 7, he was likely able to overcome and become far more in tune with the Force as a whole, as well as add yet another tool into his arsenal for the time when the Jedi Masters would once again be called to protect the galaxy in a time of need. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this idea? Do you think these factors are what allowed Luke to learn Form 7 in Legends, or do you think that there was something else working in his favor? Why do you think Luke is one of the few Jedi to master Form 7 when other Jedi fell to the darkness? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.